Hi everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, I'm going to be rating some of the drafts that you sent through to me. I've picked out a few of my favourite unique drafts. I'll be providing positive and constructive feedback on all of them and suggesting a few transfers that you might want to make along the way in the first few game weeks. Right then, so before we get cracking and having a look at some of the drafts that I picked out, first of all, quick bit of housekeeping. All of the drafts I'm looking at today are via solioanalytics.com. I've left a link in the description below if you want to go try them out. They're completely free for the first month. I have partnered with them over the summer. I actually reached out to them. They're not paying me for this. I just think it's a really quite incredible tool. So do feel free to go and check them out. They use live market odds and you can change different functions with your own opinion as well. So I think it's a really clever bit of kit and I think it's going to massively overhaul the way that I plan this season. But to start off with, let's take a look at draft number 1. This is from Carl's FPL, and what I find really interesting about this draft is that he's managed to squeeze both Salah and Haaland into one draft without sacrificing too much elsewhere. In fact, he's also been able to plan a bench boost in game week 2. So I think that's rare for a team with two heavy hitting premiums like that with Salah and Haaland. That's 28.5 million spent. To be able to also bench boost early on is actually quite rare. I haven't seen any other drafts capable of doing that. So I think this is a very unique and interesting draft. Now, Salah and Haaland actually rotate fairly well for captaincy over the first 6 game weeks. I think if you move across the first few, we're looking at 3 weeks of each. So Haaland in game week 2, probably Haaland in game week 3 instead of Salah at home to Arsenal. Game week 4, you've got Salah against Burnley, Salah against Everton in 5, and then Burnley at home for Haaland in 6. So you're splitting the captaincy pretty well. So it does make sense to have both of them. And Haaland is largely being overlooked too. So I think a very interesting option to be going with from the start that a lot of people are just generally overlooking right now. Now, what that does to your overall starting 11 most weeks, outside of the bench boost in game week 2, which we will come to, I think actually you've dealt with this really well. There's a nice mixture of talent there. You've got a few price points covered off, and I think there's only a couple of price points that you're not covering that might cause you issues down the line. The major critique I would have of this draft is that if anyone between the price point of Palmer down to, let's say, 8 million-ish, maybe 8.5 for Verts, those players are very difficult for you to get to with this draft without getting rid of either Haaland or Salah. Most likely Haaland, in which case it would be a minimum of 2 free transfers to do so. So I don't think it would be wild to suggest that you're going to want to get to one of those players, whether that's Palmer, whether it's Verts, whether it's Bruno Fernandes in the first few game weeks, especially game week 3 when Bruno goes at home to Burnley. That might be an interesting option that you get more tempted to take a bit of a leap of faith on. But with this draft, it is quite difficult to get there. So even if you were to downgrade Chris Wood, which is probably the only other player outside of Haaland or Salah where you could take enough funds out, you're probably only downgrading to maybe a 6 million option, maybe 5.5 if you're lucky. And then you're moving the money across to maybe upgrade Rodgers. That might just about get you to Verts. It might get you to Bruno if not too many price swings have happened, but it does leave things a little bit tight. And then you've got a lot of money in just 3 picks, Haaland, Salah, and then Bruno as well. So it's a little bit inflexible. But I think what you lose in flexibility, unless, of course, you sell either Haaland or Salah, of course, in which case they're your cash cow, you then gain in terms of what you're getting from the bench boost. So moving over to game week 2, the bench boost does look pretty strong. You've got Sanchez or Dubravka as your keepers. So both of them have a decent fixture. You could bench either of them on the bench boost. Then you've got Arias against Bournemouth away from home, Reinildo against Burnley, and then a choice of Richards, Anderson, or Williams to complete the bench boost, all of which have absolutely fine fixtures in terms of a bench boost. So Solio actually has this down as a 13-point bench boost, which I think is absolutely fine, by the way. I think the average for a bench boost in the first half of the season without the double game weeks will be somewhere between 10 to 15. 13 is absolutely fine, and you're not spending too much money to do so. You've got 2 very cheap options, the 4 million keeper and the 4 million defender. You've got a 4.5 million defender in there as well, and 2 actually 4.5 million defenders. And then you've got 8 stronger attackers. So that's where you're putting most of the funds. I don't mind that whatsoever. The only critique I do have is maybe that it is a little bit inflexible if one of those upper price midfielders away from Salah also looks too tempting to ignore. Outside of that, you can get to pretty much anyone. Watkins is a little bit difficult to get to, or Gyökeres as well at 9 million. But I think there are ways of making that work too. So overall, Solio has recommended a few transfers over the first few game weeks. Feel free to ignore those. You can see them on the left here, bringing in the Crystal Palace assets in game week 4, for example, then taking them out over the following 2 game weeks in 5 and 6. But it comes out at 368.9 points across the first 6 game weeks, which is absolutely fine, even with including a bench boost. I think that's a really good start, and it does give you those 2 premium assets. If Haaland gets off to a hot start, you are going to cash in on those points ahead of almost every other manager in the game. So the second draft I want to look at is a very aggressive draft. That includes 3 chips being used in the first 4 game weeks, and I haven't actually seen any other drafts anything like this, so I wanted to talk about it in focus here, because it's a really interesting strategy. So bench boost in game week 1, that is an absolutely stacked team for game week 1, you can see on screen here. And the reason it's stacked is because they're sacrificing both Salah and Haaland in game week 1. They've still got Palmer as the captain, probably the second best captain in game week 1. So there is a sacrifice there. But rather than having Salah, they've spread the funds across to both Gakpo and Wirtz, which again, I think is absolutely fine as a strategy. And because they're also free hitting in game week 2 and then wildcarding in game week 4, they only have to worry about their actual normal team once, and that's in game week 3. So if we shift across to game week 3, Palmer has Fulham at home. That's an absolutely fine week for a captain. And then Salah, who you're missing out on, has Arsenal that week. So you're not really missing out on Salah that much that week anyway. And you're probably benching one of the Liverpool midfielders. In this case, the model has suggested benching Gakpo. So actually, it works out pretty well. It's a really interesting strategy. If we go back to game week 1, you've got double Tottenham defense, which if you weren't wildcarding in game week 4, I probably wouldn't recommend. It's maybe a little bit strong. But against Burnley at home in game week 1, and then in game week 3, you've got Bournemouth at home, that's absolutely fine to double up. And even in game week 3, you don't need to start both of them either. So it's another advantage, I suppose, of going really aggressive on the chip strategy to begin with. You can pile into Spurs, you can pile into, let's say, Nottingham Forest as well. You've got double defense there. So Brentford at home in game week 1, I think you'll probably be benching one of them in game week 3. Yeah, so you've got Virgil van Dijk starting against Arsenal. You could arguably just start Williams instead of him as well, go double Nottingham Forest defense at home to West Ham. It's a really nice looking team in both game week 1 when you're bench boosting. Very, very stacked bench boost, by the way. And then game week 3, in the only other week that you're worried about, it's also looking pretty decent as well. And you're avoiding Salah that week in what is a tough fixture. The game week 2 free hit, we don't need to talk about too much, but you can pile into players from Arsenal. You can look at getting Haaland in for the Tottenham home fixture. And you don't need to worry about structure too much. So you can start Esteve at home to Sunderland. You can have double Crystal Palace defence at home to Nottingham Forest without having to worry about what that looks like in the future. And then you're wildcarding out of it in game week 4. I don't think we need to talk about the wildcard too much yet because things will change. But by game week 4, you're going to have a lot more information. So it's a really interesting and very aggressive strategy, one that I hadn't honestly considered myself. But it comes out really, really high in terms of the expected points from the first 6 game weeks. Nearly 400 points. If you can get 400 points from 6 game weeks, even with 3 chips played, that is a really good start to get off to. So it's aggressive. It's probably too bold for me because I'm quite a conservative manager at the start, but wow, if you can nail that bench boost in game week 1 and then get a good free hit off in game week 2, you are absolutely flying and you'll be like in the top 10k within no time. It's then just about whether or not the later chips coming in are going to catch up with that. So yeah, all power to you. I couldn't possibly critique it any more than that. Obviously, you're missing out on Salah, but I think you've done a very clever, very smart thing by diversifying with Gakpo and Wirtz. The Tottenham defense is also very bold. I do like it a lot. You've covered a lot of the bases. It's a stacked attack. Yeah, I can't really fault it, to be honest. It's very bold. Okay, so on to draft number 3. This is one that looks a little bit more similar to my most recent draft in the sense that you've got Salah with Palmer. You're looking at a bench boost in game week 2 and a few of the pieces of the jigsaw are quite similar to what I'm looking at as well. However, the reason I wanted to focus on this draft in particular is because it's got some really interesting differentials in there that maybe are being overlooked a little. So Matheus Nunes, number 1 in the back line. I would be a little bit nervous about this because obviously Man City have only played 1 pre-season friendly. He got 45 minutes coming off the bench in that one. So my prediction would be that he's just not quite nailed enough at right back for me to want to take a punt on him. However, if you've seen something different and you are convinced that he is the right back for Man City and he's not going to get taken off too early or share minutes too much with Rico Lewis, then it could really work. And Man City are a great defence. Not many people are going with Man City defence full stop at the moment. And he is a little bit cheaper than the likes of Gvardiol or Aït-Nouri as well. So I don't mind that as a punt if you think the minutes are there. Murillo over Williams. Williams is obviously becoming a more popular pick. Murillo has the better defensive contributions. He does cost a little bit more, but I don't think that's too much of a problem if you think that he can outperform Williams significantly over the first 6 game weeks. The model certainly suggests that he can do so. Moving on to the elephant in the room, I suppose, which is triple Everton in your starting 11 as well. That is the boldest thing I think about this team. Ndiaye is currently in my 11, so I can't really critique him too hard. There are other 6.5s out there that I do like the look of that I am considering myself. But Ndiaye on penalties, good minutes, with a decent set of opening fixtures. In isolation, I don't mind that whatsoever. Then adding in Tarkowski and Dewsbury Hall, I think each individually at their own price point in their own position are probably some of the best picks in each of those individual roles. So 5.5 million defenders. Tarkowski is a defensive contributions monster. Not bad fixtures defensively either. So absolutely fine. Ndiaye we've spoken about, fine at 6.5. And then a 5 million option being Dewsbury Hall playing in that number 10 role for Everton. Again, not something that I can really complain about too much. I think the main critique I would have is that if Everton don't get off to as good a start as you might think they will, then all 3 of them could be problems. Whereas if you only go with 1 or 2 of them, then at least it's a slightly smaller issue to have to deal with. And Everton are a good side. They're a solid Premier League outfit at the moment, especially under David Moyes. But it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they get off to a slower start than we expect. And if they do, you've got triple Everton that you need to worry about. Now, what I would say to balance that out before you start commenting saying, yeah, but I can bench them. Well, yeah, you can, absolutely. So you've got Strand Larsen on the bench in game week 1. I would imagine that this is a rotatable 8-man attack where Strand Larsen usually starts in a 3-4-3 ahead of Dewsbury Hall and then can come in whenever there's an injury or maybe Everton have a particularly good fixture and you can double up on that Everton midfield there with Ndiaye. The other really interesting player that I would like to talk about is Jorginho Rutter, who has gone under the radar a little bit, but Brighton fans are liking the look of him. He looks likely to get more minutes this season with João Pedro gone. Might even play up front at times as well, with Danny Welbeck not being necessarily the least injury-prone player out there. So he does tick a lot of boxes, and he is sneakily coming into the conversation a little bit more now. So I like him a lot as a differential. I think that is a very smart move at 6 million. What I would say is with this draft, you've got a big gap down from Palmer to the 6.5 and DI with not much flexibility between those price points. So like I mentioned with the first draft, if you wanted to get to Bruno or Wirtz or Marmoush, it's not easy to do so without getting rid of one of either. Well, you could get rid of Palmer or Salah, but I'd assume you'd want them longer term. And then you're looking at probably taking money out of Bowen or Watkins. Now, Bowen and Watkins, I would say, are 2 of the massive strengths of your team. I do like both of them. I like Bowen in particular because it gives you that flexibility to move down to a 7.5 million forward, whichever one happens to be the standout option after a few game weeks. Meanwhile, Bowen has a good run to begin with as well, so you can expect some points there. Watkins might have penalties. It's not impossible that he does. He's not got the best penalty record, but even without them, his underlying data is great. At 9 million, he's in my team, as is Strand Larsen on your bench, by the way. And I do really like it from a structural point of view, because if you wanted to get across to Gyökeres and he seems like the best player in the game all of a sudden, then you can do so pretty easily. So Watkins, Bowen and Strand Larsen, I've got no problems with any of them. I think my only critique, if you'd even call it a critique, is the lack of that price point in the midfield, or the lack of flexibility to get to that price point between 9 million down to 8 million. Now, I'm sure there are ways that you figured out of doing so, and you can always take the money out of your forward line to get there. Bench boost in game week 2 also looks really strong. So Estev and Dubravka come off your bench in this model, but I would imagine you probably just have them as your bench boost players. And then you've got Sanchez, Anderson, Dewsbury Hall, Jorginho, all with decent enough fixtures on a bench boost. I really like it. The bench boost is expected to do really, really well here. Some great solid options, probably about 14, 15 points on a bench boost. And if we scroll across the expected points with a few transfers along the way that the model has recommended, 380 points, having just used 1 chip across the first 6 game weeks, is coming out really strongly. Now, as a comparison, the previous one I looked at was 400 points, or just under 397 from the first 6 game weeks using 3 chips. So you're only 18, 17 points behind that. And then if you look at the first one we looked at, that's 368 points or 369 points with a bench boost game week 2 as well. So this one comes out really strongly with the models. It's rated highly, it covers off captaincy well, and you've got some nice differentials in there as well. So I can't critique it too heavily. I think it's a really nice draft, maybe a little bit strong on Everton. And if Everton don't get off to a great start, you might want to move them on a little bit, but Dewsbury Hall on the bench most weeks, I think you're probably fine there too. So on to draft number 4, and this one has a familiar structure as well, quite similar to the previous one, but with a different chip strategy, which does disregard the bench boost in game week 2. So we're not thinking about that anymore. We're now looking at a free hit in game week 6. So some of the peripheral outskirt picks are changing here based on the fact that free hit in game week 6 might dictate the players that they're most interested in to begin with. Now, what they've got in this draft, they've got a few of the picks that I'm already very familiar with. I've got a lot of them in my side. So Salah, Palmer, Munoz, Van Dijk, Sanchez, Anderson as well, Watkins are all in my current draft, as is Williams. In fact, that whole bench is identical to me as well. So Dubravka, Williams, Giu and Esteve, all becoming more popular picks, all in my current team. But there are a few interesting differentials here, which I do like the look of. Now, Mateta is a nice 7.5 million forward that I think is generally being overlooked. He could have penalties. He's got great underlying attacking data, runs at about a goal every other game throughout the season. And although some people suggest that Palace get off to a slow start, I think there are mitigating factors that led to them getting off to a slow start, in particular last season. Mateta had just been off at, I think it was the Olympics over the summer, and didn't get a full pre-season by any means. He looks so sharp in pre-season this year. He's obviously gone away, come back, fit, firing, ready to go, and he hasn't had a workload of the Olympics to deal with throughout the summer. He's scored a ton of goals in preseason. I wouldn't normally look at that, but it does say to me that he is feeling good right now. So I'm pretty bullish on Mateta. I think that's a great differential to have, as is Gakpo. Now, Gakpo is a player that I'm going to be looking at very closely in the final week of preseason. Obviously, they've got the Community Shield. At the time I'm recording, he is in the starting 11. I'll be checking out how he gets on. But regardless of how he does, unless he gets injured, I think he is a very interesting option at 7.5 million. Playing at left wing, and it looks like the left wing position is fairly locked down for him right now. I think the only hesitation I'd have over him is the expected minutes. Now, that's not to say he won't start, because I think he is in their best starting 11 right now, but they do have a young academy graduate coming through that they want to give minutes to. Florian Wirtz can play out on the left wing at times as well, and especially if they sign Alexander Isak, Ekitike is not going to get 0 minutes, so Ekitike might also steal some minutes on the left-hand side too. So I think Gakpo is their preferred left winger, but is he going to be restricted to something like 60 to 70 minutes a match? Possibly. Maybe not for the first few game weeks. So from a starting point, probably absolutely fine. But I'm in particular looking at extending my wildcard as long as I can. I'm trying to reduce transfers, reduce risk. Gakpo to me indicates someone who could become more of a risk over time. Now, again, that's more of a finishing matches risk rather than a starting matches risk. But that all matters. That all counts. So if he's only getting 60 minutes a match, then you reduce his effectiveness by a third. So I like him from the start. He's an interesting differential at 7.5. I'd be maybe a little bit cautious on the minutes down the line, but I think fine from the get-go. Rodgers as well, dealing with a little injury from pre-season. So as long as we get good news, then I think he's fine to go with from the start. I also like the double up of Rodgers with Watkins. Villa's fixtures looking really good after Newcastle is out the way. So that double up where they do like to assist and score alongside each other as well, you could be quids in on that one. It could be a nice double act that provides a little bit of a compound differential where neither of them themselves are differentials, but barely anyone has both of them. So I like that as an aggressive play. I think that's very sensible. And then you've also got covered off with a lot of the price points as well. So you've got a 6 million defender in there. In fact, you've got all of the individual price points covered in defense. I think that's smart. In the midfield, you can pretty much get anywhere. It's a little bit more difficult to get to someone like Wirtz, Bruno, Marmoush, for instance, but you're only 1 million shy of it if you remove Gakpo. So there's there are ways of maybe doing a double swap there that I don't hate. Anderson, I think, will tick along very nicely, so you rarely ever want to make transfers in that fifth midfielder. And then up front, I think, again, you've got two very solid options who should get good expected minutes. So overall, yeah, I'm a fan of this one, and I like the free hit 6 strategy. So moving over to game week 6, you can go aggressive with this strategy, and you can triple up on Man City at home to Burnley, where previously you had none of them. You can triple up on Nottingham Forest at home to Sunderland, another great fixture. You can pile into Everton at home to West Ham. I think it's a good week to be looking at a free hit if you structure your team in the appropriate way beforehand. Because this week, okay, Palace away for Liverpool is not the worst fixture, but I think you can get more bang for your buck out of City at home to Burnley. You can also squeeze in Palmer there at home to Brighton. You've got some great fixtures for Nottingham Forest, Everton, and Aston Villa as well, arguably against Fulham. I think free hit 6 is a very sensible strategy. And considering you're not using a bench boost with this strategy, on the expected points from the first 6 game weeks, minus those 4 extra players you get from a bench boost, 366 is coming out pretty strong as well. So it is a bit behind the other strategies we've looked at, but it is worth noting that this is without those 4 extra players that you gain from a bench boost. So again, it comes out pretty strongly. I am a fan of it. It's looking more and more similar to what I've currently got. There are a few tweaks here, as we mentioned, but overall, I do quite like it. And despite the lack of a bench boost, I think you're set up pretty well for the first 6 game weeks. Okay then, so far in this video, we've had a look at a Salah times Haaland draft. We've had a look at different chip strategies and structures for the opening 6 game weeks. But the one I wanted to finish off with today is from Dave CZ, who has offered up a no Salah and no Haaland draft, and also no chips planned for the first 6 game weeks. So this is a very different and very interesting, unique structure. What is interesting here is the amount of team strength he's got in the entire 15 by not going with either of those ultra premium assets. Now, obviously, we all know the risks of going without Salah or Haaland, or both in this case, because they are such quality assets. They are going to tick over about an attacking return every game week. But if you can spread the funds wisely, you might be able to get out ahead of the crowd if either one of them gets off to a slower start, or if the more popular one, Salah in this case, gets off to a slower than expected start as well. Now, obviously, we know what the risks are. They can explode and they are very good assets. And with this structure, it's not going to be particularly easy to get across to them in 1 or 2 moves if you needed to, if you were desperate. But because you haven't got any chips planned so far, there's nothing to say that you can't just break glass in case of emergency and hit the early wild card. I'm sure that you've got that in the back of your mind in case of emergency. So again, I don't want to too heavily critique that. You've gone with no Salah and no Haaland for a reason. So looking beyond those 2 assets, I think it's a really strong 11, and in fact, a really strong 15. It goes to show what you can do when you take the money out of those 2 premiums. He still does have 2 very good premium assets in Saka and Palmer. Palmer will probably take the captain's armband in the first game week, and then Saka in game week 2 is a very good captaincy option at home to Leeds. So I think after that, it gets a little bit more complex. You're looking at maybe Bruno Fernandes in game week 3 against Burnley at home. I do quite like that. Game week 4, you're probably looking, okay, the model's saying Brentford away for Palmer. You could look at Saka at home to Nottingham Forest. Game week 5, what have we got here? So yeah, Man United away for Palmer. Saka at home to Man City probably isn't ideal. Bruno's got Chelsea, probably not ideal. You could arguably look at someone like a Watkins who you've got up front. Obviously, again, you've rearrange the funds and spread them across the 11. So you do have a number of very good sub-premium assets. So you've got Saka, Palmer, Bruno, Wirtz, Watkins. So you've almost got like the 5 best assets you can have if you removed Salah and Haaland from the game. So I do like it. It's a strategy that I think has legs, and it does always give you a really strong bench. So although you haven't got a bench boost planned, as long as Dubravka does come in and get that starting spot for Burnley, you can look at bench boosting most weeks and it'll probably give you 10 to 15 points any week, even if we go to game week 6. So Palmer captaincy that week, the bench that week admittedly probably isn't that strong, but most other weeks, even game week 1, for instance, you could look at doing it if you thought Dubravka was going to start. It really does go to show what you can do without those 2 premium assets. You've got an absolutely stacked midfield. You've got an 8 strong attack where Xhaka and Perraud can rotate. I like both of them, especially Xhaka. I think he's going to be an underrated gem at 5 million. He's on free kicks, it looks like, as well. He's going to be absolutely locked into that Sunderland side. So a very good pick there. You've got a stronger bench than most will have. And whereas most people have to compromise on either the defense or the attack because they fit in Salah or Haaland, you've got strong in both. So you've got 2 6 million defenders alongside a 5.5. Obviously, the actual players themselves are completely up for debate at this point, but it's a strong structure where you can effectively have any defenders you want and move across to any defenders you like. And then in your forward line as well, whereas most people who have Watkins have to compromise with a 6.5, you've gone with 3 strong attack there, including a 7.5 million forward in Mateta. Now, I'm recording this during the Community Shield between Liverpool and Palace. It's actually half time. I stopped recording to watch the first half for a little bit. I've come back to it. Mateta took the penalty in the first half ahead of Eze. So he might be the penalty taker. He might be the person who stands up and takes all of the penalties for Crystal Palace. I would argue that they're probably going to share it between Eze and Mateta, but he could have a good penalty share. He might take all of them. So I think at 7.5, he's one of the standout options now. And yeah, it's just the elephant in the room of no Salah, no Haaland. I think if you can get around that, if you can work around that and you're happy with the captaincy most weeks, which I think considering you've got multiple good captainable assets in every game week, I think it's kind of fine. Now, the other thing that we did mention is there's no chips being played. So if we go across to the expected points for the first 6 game weeks, it is coming out a little behind the rest at 350 points, just under. But that's without any chips played. So you could go into game week 7 with all of your chips intact, and you can hit the wild card, go really aggressive on a bench boost if you wanted to. And like I said, there's not really that much stopping you from hitting the wild card early in a case of emergency, using a triple captaincy or bench boosting early with what is a really strong 15 as well. So overall, on paper, it looks like you might be missing out a little bit, but I understand the logic completely. And whilst it's not a draft that I would perhaps go for, I've seen very smart managers going for a no Haaland, no Salah draft this season. So again, do not let me put you off of it whatsoever. And it is kind of incredible, the 15 that you can get out, and particularly the 11 you can get out most weeks when you do go without those premium assets. Now, as we reach the end of today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit like and subscribe to the channel, especially if you enjoyed the video, of course. And do remember to go check out solioanalytics.com. I've left a link in the description below. The first month is completely free, so you can get your draft rated. And if I haven't featured your draft, let me know in the comments below what points yours would be expected to get after 6 game weeks via Solio as well. And it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top.